soft spot for Noam Chomsky, even though he is, I think, by some measures, a communist. But he said a very interesting thing in a video that the New Statesman published, and we'll show it to you in a second. And he says that we are at the greatest risk in world history. Our safety and survival is never at a greater risk. And I assumed he was talking about the war in Ukraine. Well, here, take a look at Noam Chomsky. Look at this.
We're approaching the most dangerous point in human history. The first article I wrote, at least that I can remember, was in 5th grade. I was 10 years old. I can date it very easily because of the time and the topic. It was an article about the fall of Barcelona. It was an article for the elementary school newspaper. I was the editor, probably the only reader, maybe my mother. The article I partly remember. It was about the fall of Austria, fall of Czechoslovakia, fall of Toledo, now the fall of Barcelona. Looks like the grim cloud of fascism is spreading over the whole world, inexorable. Well, that was February 1939. Haven't changed my opinion since. It's just gotten worse. The doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, under Trump, they abandoned minutes, moved to seconds, 100 seconds to midnight. That's where it is now, because the threats are accumulating. We're approaching the most dangerous point in human history. Nothing like it before. We are now facing the prospect of destruction of organized human life on Earth from environmental destruction, and not in the remote future. We are approaching irreversible turning turning points which will not be, cannot be dealt with any longer. It doesn't mean everybody's going to die, but it's going to mean moving to a future in which the lucky ones will be those who die more quickly.
Wow, there was a lot in there. The first thing, and I was thinking about it for half the time, was that he was writing in grade 5, when I think he said he was 10 years old, about the fall of Barcelona and the rise of fascism across Europe. That would have been a very interesting grade 5 child. And when he says that he was the only one who read his paper other than his mom, I agree with him there. He's a character. He's a pessimist. He's a skeptic. I would even say he's an expert on certain things. But of all the things he said we're going to die from, and the lucky will be the ones who die quickly, you look around the world today, whether it's global corporations, big pharma, surveillance state, social credit, Chinese-style de-banking, de-platforming, possible nuclear war in Ukraine. Of all those things, the thing that Noam Chomsky, expert on, information and global politics, the thing he chooses to be the most scared of is global warming. Joining us now to talk about this is our friend Marc Morano, the boss of ClimateDepot.com. Marc, I did not expect that. I thought he was going to talk about NATO or a post-American world or the emerging corporate surveillance state, but he's worried about global warming.
Yes, and he has been actually for quite some time, Ezra. First of all, most of his fame in the intellectual left and in the media and in the sort of progressives has been since the Vietnam War. He's a protest guy. Hated Reagan, hated the Vietnam War, hated drafts, was a hero to many of those anti-war protesters, which is all fine and good. He built himself as an anti-fascist, as a, fighting the powers that be. The problem now, and I see the same problem that runs through Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it just baffles my mind. The guy's phenomenal, recognizes the World Health Organization, recognizes all that stuff. But then when it comes to climate, there's a blind spot. And somehow, all the criticism they gave of everything, they somehow accept Green New Deal style, United Nations, all the same stuff. So what Noam Chomsky has said, first of all, just on COVID, he said wearing a mask, refusing to wear a mask is the equivalent of taking an assault rifle to a grocery store. He said Trump's denial of climate change was worse threat to humanity than Hitler. He said this
Oh my
4
God.
years ago. These are some of the things Noam Chomsky is known for. He said that Biden on climate is further left than any Democratic candidate in memory, and that's absolutely true because Biden is much further to the left than that. But what's interesting about Noam Chomsky is he's had that same blind spot. Yeah. He will tell you that we're going to die from climate change. He will tell you that unmaskers are essentially committing assault. He will tell you Trump is Hitler for climate denial. But at the same time, he wants to empower this sort of permanent one-party state that's going to strip away all of our freedoms. And it just doesn't make sense for a guy who was against the powers that be, against the Pentagon, against the man, against the draft, against the Pentagon, Pentagon war machine. This is where he's come to. It doesn't make any sense.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.